Welcome to part 2 of the interview with Ash Coyote and Eric Risher. In this segment, we talk about the much anticipated film called The Fandom. Enjoy.
I really like the dynamic of the docuseries going into, I guess, individual topics, getting into detail that are too small. You know, you said earlier they're too small to put into a film that has to be within like a 90-minute frame. But then having a docuseries that specifically focuses on something that isn't explored in detail, but for longer, which would be like the history of the fandom. Because you're right, that isn't explored as often. There are some videos on YouTube of some conventions from the 90s, but that's about it. And if you don't have the context to it, then it has a little less meaning outside of the visuals that are there. And so I'm really excited for it. Oh my gosh.
I have to say that I learned a lot about the history by just working on this project, because I had seen some of those images before, but you're right, I didn't have the context that I needed to fully appreciate like who these people were and why they were instrumental in making the fandom what we know it as today. Like, I thought I had a pretty good idea of like where the community came from, but it wasn't until I really like learned the specifics that it's like, oh wow, there's so much more than I was even aware of, and that's probably the case for a lot of people. So we quickly realized that there was a lot that we wanted to cover. There's also a little bit of pressure on us because now we're kind of taking part in helping memorialize like that story.
Oh,
so
yeah.
We got it right, and so we spent a lot of time talking to different people to get a sense of story from different perspectives, but also did a lot of research and like read up on like memoirs. Like Joe Strike wrote a history of the fandom called Furry Nation. That was one of the major resources that we used to kind of cross-reference the interviews, be like, okay, are the dates lining up? Are people's stories? Because sometimes, you know, memories can fail. You might have the right person who was in that moment, but they might quote you the wrong date or something. So there's a lot of like fact checking that had to go into it. So we want to make sure that the story is preserved so that others like have it, because so that this becomes a tool, an educational tool in a sense.
Oh my god, you wouldn't believe the amount of research that goes into this kind of stuff. So like when I was getting ready to like see if this was like an idea to like jump on, I wrote out a notebook, like a whole notebook full of everything, constructing timelines, focusing on different topics, asking myself questions to see if I could find the answers in the history. And like, oh my god, it's I went through like a few weeks solid of just sitting there like kind of like diving through this stuff, and like, oh my god, it's so much to digest.
Where did you even begin, like, with the research? Like, there's always that first thing that you have to look up. Like, where did you even start with that, such a big topic that's not covered?
Well, it all started with Chip. Chip's been in the fandom since 1991. He kind of has known a lot of those people, you know, like some of the people that we ultimately ended up, you know, like running around the country and filming. And he sort of really kind of, I would say he was like the catalyst for everything. It was like we had been sitting down, like, so it was just before we had finished up the last episode, or not the last episode, because the last episode was finished later, but like just as we were finishing up the session with Ash out here in Colorado, and we were all sitting down in a room, or in my studio room, and we were talking about, well, do we want to do like a season 2? Do we want to, you know, like, what do we want to do? And Chip just was like, well, nobody ever talks about the history of the fandom. And I was like, that's a good point. And like, my knowledge of the fandom back then, and I think, you know, like Ash and I parallel very like hard on like everything. So like our perspective of it versus like Chip's perspective, having lived through it, you know, like we're two different things. And so I had to sit down and I was just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to like go through, figure out everything, you know, like see if there's a story here. Right. And oh my God, is there a story? Like,
oh yeah.
It's a strange one. It's a fascinating one. It's everything that you never expected, and some of the things that you did. Like I don't even know where to begin. Like, it's just incredible. Like, it was just really, it was a really kind of humbling experience, I think, more than anything. But yeah, like,
absolutely. I mean, I think realizing that no one really was talking about this story, at least the way that we came to understand it, made us realize like that we'd really stumbled upon something here, and that made it all the more important that we make this film.
Yeah. I have to ask, of all the documentaries that have been done about the fandom, why did you choose to make your own?
Well, I mean, like, so.
It's a hard question.
This is going to be a different question for Ash, I'm sure, but like in my my own personal feelings, thoughts, and ideas. This is going to sound really weird. I just don't think that there had been as much. This is, oh God, this is so.
You can do it. We got your back.
I don't want to talk down on anyone or like anybody else's like things. It's like, I mean, like, here's the thing, like everybody has their own perspective. And like, for me personally, as a filmmaker, I have my own unique perspective, right? And like, I've seen films touch on the fandom. I've seen films kind of espouse their own ideas about the fandom. And I have, seen the media coverage, which I'm sure all of you are aware of, like the crass media coverage that we've gotten about the fandom. And like, honestly, like after transitioning, after going through such a life-changing event and experiencing all those things and having to relook at my life and everything else in a different light, I realized that there was a story that I needed to tell in there too. And that as like an artist, it's as much about kind of like expressing your own voice and kind of bringing that out and sharing it. And like I have a very emotional voice. I have a very I don't know how to put this. I mean, like I care a lot about the community, about my friends, about everything that makes up, like the fandom. And I wanted to share that. And thankfully I was able to find somebody, hi Ash. Sorry. That was able to be on that level with me too. And I think that that's like all that anybody could ever wish for as an artist is to be able to work together, like, and make, like something beautiful. Yeah. So I don't know, that's why I approached it that way. I just, like, it's leaving your mark. It's showing that you care and you want to give back something to a community that gave you everything.
What's really interesting is we only have seen the trailer that's currently on YouTube, and I watched it, and even though it was only like 3 minutes long, it made me cry because it's like,
oh yeah,
well, because it's like it's a part of its history, and I felt validated, and I just felt so overwhelmed. And both of you, in your own separate messages, said if you liked the series and you liked the trailer, you're gonna love the movie. And you both said it. And I just know I'm just going to be like, oh my God, I'm going to have to like a box of tissues and like chocolate and all this stuff to like eat to watch this movie. I'm so excited for it. But because of how you took your time and trying to find your words to explain why you chose to make your own documentary in its own was probably the most beautiful and best way to say it, because that's how I know you're passionate. It's how I know that you put yourself into it. Some people can answer it like super quickly, but for you, there was part of you and there was emotions in your answer that really, like, I really liked.
Like I also, sorry, I want to point out that it's not just mine. It's Chip's film and, like Ash's film and like the community's film on that part too. Like these kind of things just don't exist without like the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears of every single person.
And having support with that is just adds to it.
Yeah,
well, absolutely. I think support is incredibly valuable as a filmmaker because it's such a collaborative process. I mean, I've worked on other short documentaries about the fandom before, but I think this is beyond anything that I could have ever done by myself. Just because you are capable of so much more when you have help, but also allowed us to kind of compare our perspectives and I think create something that's hopefully a little bit more universal, because we get to temper each other's ideas and say like, well, let's consider this perspective too and make sure that we give a voice to this individual. And allowing each other to like bounce ideas off of one another throughout the entire process, I think made a much more cohesive and encompassing film as a whole that I think we would have made if we had done this as like individual like filmmakers. So for me, like this, I'm like astounded that I found another filmmaker my age who was just as passionate about not only the fandom but about documentary. Who even had the same furry name as me. Willing to take the time to explore the story and do it right. And I mean, like I've worked on other, like I said, you know, fandom stories before. So for me, when Ash pitched the idea, it was like, okay, is this story something that hasn't been told before? Because if so, then yes, I'm on board. But if it's going to be redundant, then I've already like worked on certain stories about the fandom. I don't need to go there again. And when we talked about it, I was pretty convinced immediately that this is not something that we've seen before, because I was kind of blown away by what we uncovered, because I would have probably told you that the internet was the most integral component in how the fandom got going. And I think if that's your perspective going into your movie or this movie, you'll find that you'll probably be waiting for the internet to show up for the good first half of it.
Now, Eric, if you've done a few, you said you've done a few of these documentaries or fandom related films before, and I've seen a handful. I don't know which ones you've been affiliated with off the back of my hand, or head. I don't know.
But back of your head?
Back of my head, back of my hand. I don't know which one it is. But would you say that, like, with the collaborative process of it, is with this new film that y'all are working on, or it's almost done now, would you say that has the most, like, outward perspective or use of collaboration in comparison to other pieces of, film that you've worked on in the past?
Oh, for sure. At least in terms of the films that I've worked on regarding fandom.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I worked on Furries, my first documentary, it started largely as a senior thesis film for my degree. So a lot of my collaborators were other filmmakers who were also working on their own degrees. And then after that, all the projects I worked on were things I did independently, just kind of on my own. I had a camera and I had the drive, so I'd go to a convention and I would make a short piece like I did with Fox and Pepper at BLFC when I filmed the behind the scenes of how they put together the furry musical that they premiered at that convention. And that was basically just me going out there and doing it. But this was a completely different experience because not only did I have an incredibly talented cinematographer like Ash like shot this film, and it gave me some of like the most beautiful shots to work with as an editor that I've ever had the experience of working with. So that was a pleasure. But also just like on a like intellectual level, like I think we just really connected, and that made the collaborative process so much fun. It really, really helps when all people working on a project together clearly show and demonstrate that same passion. Because sometimes I worked on big productions and you see people who are just there for a paycheck. And I mean, that's fine, it's a job. But when you're there to like tell a story that's important to you and you see that the other people working with you have that same energy, something really special can happen. And I don't know, like every film that I work on, I think like the last one that I did is the one that I'm the most proud of. But the series was something that we shot largely over a course of a weekend at MSF, and I'm really proud of what we pulled together with that material. But the fandom film is something that we spent a lot of time and energy researching and then actually producing. And I think that you see the leap in production quality between the series and the movie, and I'm really, really proud of us for that alone. So I just hope that other people like it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
And with having, multiple hands on the project, I know filming definitely, it takes funds. Cameras are definitely not cheap. But with the collaboration of it, with the funding itself, did the fandom help with the the monetary help that y'all needed, or did you have to use your own funds with the groups that were helping you, or anything like that?
It's a little bit both.
A little bit both.
Little column A, little column B.
Yeah. So like, we did a Kickstarter campaign that was reasonably successful for a film. We pulled in what was it, like 32,000? But
yeah, a little over that. Yeah, and which was hugely helpful. The community, I think, at large, was responsible for the majority of those funds coming in, to which we are enormously indebted.
yeah, and you know, like how those things go. You know, like films are expensive. Most people don't realize that. Yeah. Chip and I self-funded the rest, which I don't want to talk about numbers.
I don't blame you. I don't think anyone wants to talk about numbers.
It was a sizable quantity of money. That's what we'll go with, and it's not a.
I think it's fair to say that we came in a bit lower than most indie productions of this scale. So I'm proud of us for that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, films are expensive, and it was
It's challenging. I mean, it's films. I mean, like films are expensive.
There's an exchange there.
Yeah, like
I'm watching Osmos recently, and I feel like that's appropriate here. There's a give and take with anything.
I was joking around the other day with a friend who I used to work with out here, who we still stay in contact with, and like, I mean, like, the budget on the film is what we'd usually get for about a day on a you know, like on an ad, you know, like if we were to go shoot a commercial, you know, like that's what we would expend in a day. So like we really like stretched this sucker, and like I mean I feel pretty good, you know, like it was a lot of being the whole crew. That's always fun.
Yeah, it was wearing many hats, but it was also just being very fortunate by the support of the community, not just financially, but also in their ability to open up and share their stories. I mean, I think one of the things that, to me at least, motivated me to tell the history is that those voices. I mean, I didn't really know that story before because I didn't have access to that content. And I think because of the community's prior media history, sometimes being slandered by the media, I think people are afraid to tell their stories because it's just one more time that they're going to be made fun of. And if you've been in that position before, you're going to be afraid. And I think that's really reasonable. And I think that our Ash and I, having both been present in furry media on some level, with our work in the past, I think helps people feel a little bit more confident, hopefully, in wanting to share their stories because they've seen to some degree like what kind of sensibilities we had as filmmakers through our past work. So if not for them being willing to trust us, this film wouldn't exist.
So in the trailer, there are some furries who seem to have been around since the beginning, since you are talking about the history of the fandom in this. How did you like find and contact the OGs of the fandom?
I feel like I'm from LA when I say that now.
OGs.
OG fandom. Yeah, so like I God, bridging the gaps with that. That was a lot of like weird research and like personal connections. So Chip was friends with Changa, who is one of Rod and Mark's. So Rod and Mark are two of our primary subjects in the community. So Changa is one of their partners, and they're really good friends with Chip, and they kind of were able to get us in contact with Rod and Mark. And I think we had like the first time I talked to them was over Skype, and it was like I want to say like a 4 or 5 hour call.
Dang.
It was very interesting, like, because I had so many questions. I basically got on Skype with them, and I was just like, hey, you know, like, tell me some of this info, like I have so many questions about this, like maybe you can fill in these blanks. And I was starting to kind of like create my own little timeline and idea of how, like each one of these little pieces fit into the puzzle. And they were the ones who got me on to check out Joe Strike's book, Furry Nation, which is great, by the way. Definitely give it a read if you're interested in the history of the fandom. It's a very interesting account. It's a personal account. It covers a lot. But we ended up checking that out, reading that, also talking to other folks in the community. Like a common name that I think that everybody in the modern fandom will recognize is Uncle Kage. Opinions, of course, like get thrown around about him quite a lot, but like we ended up reaching out to all these individual people and kind of more or less kind of like using them to help piece together the story as we began to kind of really lay this out. So it was a lot of like friends of friends kind of thing. You know how the fandom is. Like, are you guys still there?
Yeah. No,
oh, thank God.
We're listening.
It got so quiet for a second. I was just worried.
You're so deep.
It's so deep. So yeah, like it was friends of friends, and like the community being the way it is, like everybody knows everybody practically. So like like so and so can get you in touch, with like the next person down the line, and you eventually have a film and you're on your hands.
So when you were talking, to all these people that you've had connections with and doing all this research, do you know what like the oldest known date you were able to trace? How far back you were able to reach?
That's complicated. I can let Ash, if you want to answer this one.
Sure. So if you go back into the 70s, you're going to start seeing a lot of what we're going to call like proto furry influence. So a lot of the people who actively become leading members in the community were active in the 70s, but in different fandoms, different communities. Largely comic book communities, sci-fi comic, even anime. And a lot of these individuals had a lot of crossover and overlap within their social groups, and some of them were also interested in the animal characters. And we discussed a little bit of that in the film, and we kind of focused around like the late 70s. I think the earliest date we talk about is 77. But once we start getting into like the fandom proper as we know it today, when people are actually using that word furry to kind of identify what this group is, I want to say that's probably 85.
That's right. Yeah.
Does that sound right? Yeah, 1985.
God, that's that's a long time ago, at least for me.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to think about it like that. I mean, like most people won't realize this, but like our first, like furry convention was in 1989.
And that's the first furry exclusive convention, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't even start, we still had a lot of furries in sci-fi conventions originating there, so that's not even as far back as the fandom would go. That's just the first convention.
Oh yeah, and like it's interesting to see how like those influences coalesced and kind of formed into a community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like that's kind of like a lot of where we found, the story is it's an idea that grew into something that's so much more. It blossomed. Yeah.
There's this big reoccurring theme of discovery that I'm not the only one, that there's other people who are interested in this thing as well. And that idea, that power of solidarity, of knowing that there's other people like you, is really important to the early foundational like moments of the fandom, because I think that's what empowered people to keep meeting and exploring it further. And then eventually that created the foundation of what we know it as today.
Definitely. Now, when, in the 80s and all these conventions, I've just seen a few clips on YouTube in the past. And back then it seems like fursuits weren't much of a thing. It was more art heavy. And of course, fursuit making is an art, but it was more rare. But in the film, Do you go over like the history of fursuiting or fursuit making at all, or is it more art centered?
We absolutely do. It's interesting. We had a lot of discussion over this because fursuits have kind of taken the center place in how media portrays us. So like a lot of people think that, like all furries must have fursuits, right? And that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of folks that don't suit. So like we had a lot of discussion back and forth on like how we were going to include this in the process, and we ultimately give a really good glimpse of how kind of like fursuiting came onto the scene and how it's been kind of bolstered over the years into what it is today. Like a full blown artistic industry in our community.
Really kind of looking at, again, how it goes into that component of discovering identity, both in ways that wearing a suit helps people, but also the way that it's been beneficial from people who have created a living out of it.
I like that you mention how it seems to be like fursuits in general always seems to be the forefront of media that non-furries create, and it's probably because fursuiting looks like the loudest part of the community with how different it is. But seeing a film made, by furries exploring the whole history of it, it's nice to hear that it's not just about the image of that, because that's so oversaturated in so many of the media that comes out in it. Going more into how fursuits originated and seeing how it got to where it is today, I'm really excited to hear how that goes.
Yeah, we're trying to explore it on the individualistic level, kind of sparring back and forth with contemporary and like historical entities. Yeah.
I noticed in the trailer we see a group of furries that are debating about NSFW and LGBT aspects of the fandom. I wanted to know why these two ideas were tied together in that context and being pushed out, because I didn't really get why those two were together.
I can pretty accurately explain this, I think. When it comes to like the fandom, there's generally speaking like two schools of thought, right? There's people that approach it more from kind of like an adult perspective. And then there's actually people that approach it from, like a completely like I don't even know how to put it, like a normie perspective, right? Like it's like they approach it like it's just, like a hobby. There's nothing sexual associated with it, right? So it would be like, like Joe Schmo at a science fiction convention, maybe. So the debate that kind of exists in the fandom from the get-go is that you see people coming into this space, like where they're feeling liberated and finding their identity and kind of falling into that and wanting to express it in ways that are loud and out. And then the people who are uncomfortable with that. And so we see a lot of clash in the early community, a lot of issues that ultimately end in some pretty deep-seated conflicts that still play out to this very day. It's kind of fascinating because, like I know for myself, I really don't think twice about it. Like I think the NSFW side of anything is exactly that. It's something that, like you do on your own time, right? Like who cares? If you're going to do something, do something.
That's true.
Yeah. Like it's none of my business. And yeah, like to that end, I mean, I think that that's kind of more indicative of the modern fandom, but like it wasn't always that way.
Sure. Well, I also wanted to point out that I think that LGBT identity has always been connected to the community on some level. There's a lot of like openness and acceptance within the community. I think that provides an atmosphere that allows people to feel like they can be themselves and express themselves, as we've said earlier. But that helps them feel like they can open up about their sexual identities too. The duality of that is that, particularly in the early days, I think people, when there was like less of a cultural understanding of what homosexuality was, I think people who were straight, or maybe people who were closeted even, were much more quick to react to the sudden presence of LGBT people within the furry fandom. And I think there's a pushback that happened when they started seeing that there was, in fact, a large presence of people who had different sexual identities than them. And particularly people who weren't afraid to be quiet about it. And I think maybe that's because they hadn't had an opportunity to express themselves in any kind of way before. So they found an environment where they could, and they caused some initial ripples in the early community that we still see a little bit of today.
Yeah, and actually going off of that, there's a really fascinating thing that people, if you do a little bit of research, you're bound to discover in that a lot of the artwork in the early fandom is predominantly heterosexual. And you'll see that, but that's not indicative of what the mainstream community's kind of existence was.
That's interesting. I never thought about that because I have made that observation before, where a lot of the like quote unquote vintage furry art was very heterosexual. And I always assumed that was, because it stemmed off of sci-fi interests, which tends to also have a lot of, like heterosexual norms attached to it, or just because of the times that it was, I was assumed maybe that gay people felt unsafe making art like that at the time. And it just gradually got to be, there was more representation with LGBT artwork as the years went on. But I never thought about it in that way. And I'm excited to see how that is expanded upon more when the film is released.
Yeah, well, that's one of the fantastic reveals in there. So yeah, it'll be fun. You'll like it.
Because I know from the perspective of somebody who's only, I joined the fandom when I was just a middle schooler. So that part of the fandom I didn't explore until an adult. So I didn't get to learn about anything like that until just recently. So with my own perspective, it always seems like the fandom has always been a very, sex positive space and a very, identity positive space, a space for, a lot of different people to express themselves in a safe and, healthy, consensual way. But seeing how it was very different back then because my perspective, I have no idea what that was like.
Oh yeah, no, like it's fascinating how all those kind of things play against each other too. It's like there's like a liberation of identity, but at the same time, like the conflict of mainstream society trying to push back against those identities. And, like, of course, people who are upset at, hey, this person's different. I suddenly don't like you, that kind of thing. Right. It's ridiculous, but it's also kind of a nice glimpse back in time at how other folks had to deal with it. I mean, and how they paved the way for us, more importantly. Like, I mean, I cannot stress that enough. Like, if it wasn't for the people who like carried this torch for the community back then, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are today.
Definitely not.
That's incredibly important. I'm glad that you said that, Ash, because it also kind of going back to like identity and things we were saying about how. Well, I kind of want to point out that, like, in the early days of the fandom, it kind of correlated with the same time frame that the AIDS crisis was happening. So there was a completely different relationship to sexual identities and like the larger culture than what we have going on today. So we have to remember that context when we think about what it was like to be out as a queer person back then, but also to have this additional layer of being a furry and being, strange in that regard as well. So it may be easier for people to come out today. So we have to remember that a lot of the groundwork that makes it so possible for us to have an open and accepting environment is the groundwork displayed by our founding members in many ways, because they created a space that was very sex positive.
During the AIDS crisis, it always seemed, it was always just such a taboo thing to talk about, gay relationships or anything like that, because it was, AIDS was like the quote unquote the gay disease. And it's like tying that onto the idea of people trying to push sexuality under the rug and say that it doesn't exist in the fandom when it does, and it had a part of its history. And it makes me happy to see that that's not being, totally ignored or just, touched on slightly. I'm glad that it's having its place here and being talked about and in a good context.
Speaking of love, over all the stuff that you've done, both the series and in the film that's about to be previewed soon, what did you have any favorite moments when you made the film?
I've had a ton. It's hard to pick one. I like I was saying when we took a little break, I think one of my most favorite moments was kind of sharing this wonderful decadent breakfast with a friend. Like we had interviewed, we drove down there. It took us like 12 hours to get to their place, and like we'd crashed, and he just went all out and made us one of the best breakfasts that I've ever had. Like it was just incredible. And like I think like cooking is one of like the best ways that you can show like love and caring to someone, because it kind of like it's a very intimate process, right? And when you get to share a meal with a friend, it's kind of even more so, like if they make that for you. And like I don't know, there was just something so simple about it and so nice, and kind of like it was a nice break from reality. And
Food brings everyone together.
it does.
Food is an important part of culture.
It is,
I'm
yeah.
so fat.
Mood. I can relate. But like, yeah, that was incredible. And like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I would say, like if I had another one, it would probably be like getting to go to the Skiltare House for the first time and actually meet our founding fathers. That would have been.
I want to so badly go to that. Always. Ever since I heard about it, I'm just like, oh my God, I want to go so bad.
I have to say that was my favorite part, because as the editor, I didn't really get to go into the field as often, which is fine. That's part of the job. But you get to kind of live vicariously through all these places and things that Ash was going and experiencing. But one of the things I did get to actually attend when we were shooting was the Skills Center house when we returned to do some like pickup interviews and to get some extra shots around the house. And that home is like a museum of furry history, and I could have spent days, I like longer than what we actually were there for, just going through everything because it was so well documented and preserved. And it was like I don't know, someone had given me like the keys to like Toys R Us or something. That's what it felt like. I was just allowed to just like explore to my heart's content and ask them anything. And this like we said before, this community has done so much for us. Like I don't think I would be even where I am today professionally if not for this community, because in many ways it's given me a lot of confidence. It's given me the ability to just like feel comfortable with my craft, and just kind of move forward in that way. So like being able to like turn to the people who kind of set that in motion, never knowing that we would one day turn the cameras to them to ask them their story. That was really special.
That sounds amazing.
Special moment.
It makes me want to have a museum of like, and this sounds like silly, maybe not, but like just a museum of like furry history items or art or something. I feel like that's a very niche thing, but it would still be interesting.
It's going to be one of those museums you find off like the side of a highway.
Yeah, like very much so.
Some family's going to go into and be like, what did I just go and do?
Oh no.
Well, with all that being said, we are all very excited for this film and also for season 2 of the docuseries. Do you have any kind of like any links you want to, share with us, or like if you have a Patreon, any way that not only us but our listeners can support you as you continue this project?
Well, we will be posting the new trailer here this coming week. I'm going to be launching the trailer on Friday, I believe. Okay, so I'll shoot links to you, and like we can coordinate with that. Yeah, so I have a link to the new trailer. We don't currently have a Patreon set up to support us directly for the film, but what we will be doing is when we do the live premiere of the film on July 3rd, go ahead and mark your calendars. We will be doing a like a pay what you want kind of stream. So if anybody feels generous enough to donate and stuff, we realize with the situation and like the coronavirus going around, like people's like the wallets are tight, and like the reality is like it's going to be there for free for you to watch regardless. But yeah, if you like if you're interested in buying a copy of it, like we'll have links for that and all that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I know all of us will be willing to support you and with any future endeavors you have. We really appreciate y'all coming on the show. I know Space was tearing up with all the trailers, so we're both very, very excited.
I'm an emotional person.
Me too. I cried.
It's good to be.
I cry pretty much at anything. I got like a really sensitive spirit, so when I see something that like hits hard, I'm just like, and I like turn to Felix and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Straight up ugly cry.
Yeah, like, mascara's going everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Well, with the new trailer being posted the same day that this will be going up, if anybody who is listening goes and watches it, if you have any thoughts about the trailer and you want to share with us, you can email us at talktothemuzzle@gmail.com. Whenever the film does come out, Space and I are planning on doing a review episode on it. So if you have any, anything you want to say or anything you want us to talk about, then go ahead and shoot us an email. We also have social media pages. We have a chat on Discord and on Telegram. And our Twitter is @FromTheMuzzle. Isn't that right, Space?
Correct.
Yes. And do you guys want to share your social media pages real quick so people can look you up in case they don't already have you?
Sure. I am @furry filmmaker on Twitter.
And I am @AshCoyote on Twitter and AshCoyote on YouTube.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This was a really special interview. We super appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been great.
I had a fantastic time with you. Yeah. This has been amazing. Thank you.
I'm so glad.
I really am. Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, we will see you next time, whenever that is.
See you next time.
Bye.